earth has enough for your need, but not for your greed. This was the highlight of this economic survey 2023 and 2024, which has heavily focused on the climate change, importance of natural resources, and how to combat different pollutions. Hello and welcome to the InNews series of Drishti IAS. I am Ritu and today's session is about Economic Survey 2023-2024. This is the month of July. And you may wonder that why we are presenting Economic Survey in the month of July. Because this was the election year, and in the month of January there was an economic review, not the economic survey. So this time we had this economic survey in the month of July. So that's why we are presenting economic survey in the month of July. So our team had tried to decode this 500 pages of economic survey. This was a very lengthy document, but very important one for your understanding, and it can come to your examination. So that's why it's very important to know the highlights about this economic survey. You need not to read all those 500 pages, but you must know that what are the highlights of the economic survey 2023 to 2024. And before that, you have to know that what is economic survey. So economic survey is an annual report that what we have done in the last year, which is 2023, and what we are going to do in 2024. So that is all about an overview about the economic activities which has done by the government, and also what are the lacunas we have, what are the achievements we had done economically in this country. So this session is important for your GS3 perspective. Moving towards the points of discussion part. First of all, we'll discuss the news, then we are going to discuss the highlights, and after that we are going to discuss practice question prelims. Before that, you have to like, share and subscribe to the Drishti IAS channel. Moving towards the news part. So as you already know that who is our finance minister. So Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has presented the economic survey in the parliament today, which is of 22nd of July. And I had already mentioned that what is the economic survey and why it is significant for our economic, because it will give you an overview and also about the insights for the future economic activities of a country. So this is the news which we are going to cover up in today's session. So coming to the highlights points. So here we'll discuss the first thing about the India's economy. So what the survey has told about the India's economy. So survey has projected the real GDP growth of India is 6.5 to 7%, and it also has said that because of geopolitical activities we are projecting these kind of the growth, and if there will be the explanation in geopolitical activities, geopolitical conflicts and tension, there are high chances that there will be the supply dislocations, higher commodity prices, reviving inflationary pressures, stalling monetary policy easing with potential repercussions for capital flows, and this can also influence the monetary policy of the RBI, which is the central bank of this country. And why here we are discussing about the geopolitical tensions. India is not directly involved with geopolitical tensions with many countries unlike Russia and Ukraine and Palestine and Israel. But we do have some indirect tensions with Pakistan, China and other countries, and that is influencing the India's economy. And also today we are living in a global world where every economy is connected. We are dependent on Russia for many products, for Ukraine, for other countries. So that's why if there will be the explanation of geopolitical activities, there are high chances that these outcomes will come. So now we'll have another one which is about the employment. So this election year, employment was a major issue, and so many political parties had advocated various data about the unemployment in the country and why youths are not getting job. So that's why it's very important to have an analysis on employment situation of the country. So according to the annual survey of unincorporated enterprises for 2022 to 2023, what it shows, we already had covered this thing in news and various other programs of Drishti IAS. So it shows that there is a decline in what you can say number of people who had received the jobs. So there was increase in number of unincorporated enterprises, but overall employment has decreased, and it has decreased by Earlier it was 11.1 crore and it has decreased by 10.96 crore. So this data is of 2015-16 and this is of 2022 to 2023. And there was a reduction of 54 lakh workers in manufacturing, and on the other hand we had seen that there was an expansion of workforce in trade and services. But if we'll talk about the overall reduction, so there is an overall reduction of around 17 lakh jobs, which is 16.45 lakhs in these two periods. And what are the reasons for these things? So there are two major reasons. The first is the bad debts and the second is the pandemic. So this has what you can say given a new shape of Indian economy, and it shows that Indian economy needs a structural changes. So this is about the employment. Now we'll have about the inflation. So according to the survey, the inflation rate was stable and affecting in monetary policy management. And if we'll talk about the overall inflation, so overall inflation is managed and food inflation remains high. We already had discussed this thing in economy this week, that food inflation is a major issue of this time. And we have seen that cereals prices are increasing, pulses prices are increasing. So food inflation is a matter of worry, and there is a targeted intervention needed to manage food prices effectively, because that is the ultimate source of the people's lives. And if there will be more impact on food inflation, there are high chances of hunger and starvation and more degraded life of the people. So we'll come to the next one. So this is about the India, a high growth and low inflation economy. So what is the reason behind this high inflation? And because India is a country which has a high inflation, because its population is rising and also people's income is rising, and because of that we have seen that there are chances that if your income is rising and population is rising, so they had increased their purchasing capacity, and that has created an inflation. But if you see the overall thing related to the other countries, then India has a good low inflation economy, which is the India. So here what we have seen that India has a high growth story but low inflation economy comparative to all these countries, UK, Mexico, Brazil, Russia. So this is about that. And then we have this declining inflationary pressure across the countries. So here if you'll see this graph in 2020-22, because we are recovering from the pandemic, and in 2022 also there are few areas which had received this pandemic waves. So it was at the peak, but it is declining slowly throughout the year. So this is about the inflationary pressure which is declining in all of the country, including the India also. Now we come to the another one, which is about the employment and skill development. So this is also important, because employment, there is a problem with unemployment, so many things. So what is the major reason behind this, that there is a problem with employment and there is also problem with the skill development, because we are not skilled, we lacked skilled workers in our country, and because of that they are not getting job. So here we'll have a data about this employment and skill development. So according to the periodic labor force survey, a surge in agricultural employment, and there was a reverse migration, as I had already discussed in last slide, that there was increase in unincorporated enterprises, because people had migrated when there was a period of pandemic. People had migrated from cities to their towns to their villages, and they had opened their unincorporated enterprises, just like tailoring and few other things which are not registered, and they are the only one who are investors, who are the producers, and who are the workers. So this is called as unincorporated enterprises. So there was surge in unincorporated enterprises, and so many people they went back to their agricultural activities. So that's why there is a surge in agricultural employment and reverse migration, because people had started migrating to their villages. And it had also estimated that India will require significant job creation until 2036, and it needed a strategic planning to require these kind of the job creation. And it has also says that there must be a collaboration between the government and academia and private sector, which is essential for the development of the country. And why academia is needed and why private sector is needed? First, academia will do research and development, R&D, that where we are lacking employment wise, where we are lacking skill wise, and if we need that, we are lacking here and we need such kind of investment, then private sector will come to contribute there, and the government will make policies accordingly. So that's why the nexus between academia, government and private sector is important for the economic development, for the creation of job, for what you can say creation of different kind of enterprises. Now we'll have to another one, which is about the rise in percentage of persons aged between 15 to 29 years who receive formal vocational and technical training. So we had discussed about that skills are very much needed, and India is a country which has a huge workforce but it still lacks skill. So that's why it's very important to have a skills. So here this data is showing about the skill development. So this data has been taken from the annual report of 2023 to periodic labor survey, NSO. So if we'll talk about the total, so earlier in 2017-18 we have this 2.5, then we have increased from 2.5 to 4.5, and this is between the 15 to 29 years of age. Then we'll talk about the rural areas. So it was 1.7 and we had increased to 3.4, which is great in terms of the rural areas. If we'll talk about the urban areas, then it was 4.4 and then we had increased to 7.2, which is also great. And here if we'll talk about the female also, so from 2.2 to 4.2, which is also great. So in each thing we have seen that there was a surge and there is an improvement in formal vocational and training education, and this number is into the percentage wise. So here this is the percentage wise. So now we'll come to the another one, which is about the India and world trade, because trade is very much important in this global world, and as we had already discussed about that, so much geopolitical tensions are going between different countries, especially in Europe, Middle East. So what it had impact on India? Then definitely it had impact on India. The import of India has declined, and also export of India has also declined. So because of various geopolitical tensions between countries. So India trade has stood tall amidst all global turmoil, and current account balance has become very favorable at this stance. So still we are at a good position, and there is a reduction in trade deficit compared to the previous year. And it had also talked about that how geopolitical tension has impacted India's trade with another countries, and it needs diversification of their partners, because if we are trading one thing from one country and that country is indulged into war, then we need different partners to diversify our trade. And also there was a problem with this tariffs and non-tariffs, and recently we had also discussed about the free trade agreement with the UK. So there is a constant problem with tariff, but still we are working out into this direction. Here we'll discuss about that how rupee performed throughout this year despite of pandemic, despite of geopolitical tensions. So if we'll talk about the British pound, it is in the minus, then Mexican peso, it is 1.3, Indian rupees 1.9, euro 2.6, and Japanese yen, it is most favorable, which is 18.1. So if we'll talk about that, what is the condition of Indian rupee at this stance? So it is one of the stable currencies, what we have seen throughout this thing. And if we'll talk about the forest reserve sufficient, so we have then sufficient forest reserve for import of 11 months, and here you can see that it rose like this. So the data shows that the forest reserve is in also stable condition. So we'll come to the another one, which is about the export performance in percent, and here we have taken data from the past 3 years, 2020, 2021 and 2022. So if we'll talk about share in world's merchandise exports, so it has increased. So in 2020 it was 1.6, then it had become 1.8, and it has become again 1.8. So there was no improvement. Then if we'll talk about share in world commercial service exports, so it was 4.1, then it reduced to 4.0, then it improved to 4.4. If we'll talk about share in world merchandise plus service exports, so it was 2.1, 2.2 and then 2.4. So only in this thing, world merchandise export, it has become stable, but in these two things, it has improved. If we'll talk about the import performance in percent, so what we have found that import has constantly increased throughout these years. From 2.1 to it has become 2.5, then 2.8, 3.3 to 3.5, and then 4, and also 2.3 to 2.7 to 3. So import has consistently increased, which is also good, but we had to also increase our export and we had to reduce our dependency on the other countries. If we'll talk about India's rank in world trade, so merchandise exports, so it has, earlier it was 21, then 18, then it remains stable, 18, then 14, 10, then 9, 7, services exports, 7, 8, 7, then services imports 10, 10, 10, and it has improved here. So this is about the ranking, and this is about the India's condition with the other world trade. Now we'll talk about the agriculture and MSMEs, because they are the backbone of the Indian economy, and it's very important to have a discussion on agriculture and MSME. So what the survey highlights? So the survey highlights that there can be and there are potential growth in agriculture of India, and it has emphasized on and it also says that India needs to improve its productivity through technological adoption, because we still lack so much of technology in agricultural sector. And MSME has been also identified as a crucial sector for economic growth, and which has contributed significantly in terms of employment and innovations. And it had also pointed out that there are challenges which are ahead of the MSMEs, and especially in terms of finance and markets. And if we overall talk about the India's agriculture story, then it is a success story. The survey also highlighted that earlier India was a country which was dependent on the other countries for food imports, but right now India has become a country which is exporting food material to across the world, around 60 countries. So this is the success story of agriculture of India. And if we'll talk about that, what agriculture of India needed, then it needs a value addition in agriculture, and also how to improve its employment condition in terms of agriculture. And if we'll talk about MSMEs, so there must be a bridging the credit gap, and also there must be the bridging gap of physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure. So we must take care of the digital connectivity in terms of MSMEs. Now we have this about energy and climate change. So as you already know that India has taken a place to have complete this net zero emission by 2070. And despite India is becoming a fastest growing economy of the world, our annual per capita carbon emission is very much less, and it is only about 1/3 for the global average. So we are becoming a fastest growing economy of the world. Still our per capita carbon emission is low when we'll discuss about the other countries and especially the developed countries, and we are improving good into the what you can say global average. And India has decided that it will become Viksit Bharat by 2047, and in order to become a Viksit Bharat we need to combat these kind of climate change things, and also we need to improve energetically. So the survey outlines that India commitment to transitioning to renewable energy sources, and there must be a focus on solar and wind energy, because these are the renewable sources and natural energy, and they do not emit any kind of the pollution. So that's why we must focus on these two things, which is the solar and wind energy. And India climate action strategies are very welcoming in nature, but it needs to decentralize and it needs to go from what you can say to lower level, so that every person can contribute to achieve India's target, which is net zero emission by 2070. And India international commitments are also very much acceptable, and they need climate finance, which we had so much discussed in our daily programs, that what is climate financing, and there are so many programs which had happened in climate financing. So India's primary energy supply mix 2022 to 2023. So if we'll discuss this thing, this diagram, what we are seeing that coal has primary energy supply mix which is about 47.4%. If we'll talk about the oil and petroleum, then it is 29.3%. And if we'll talk about the bioenergy, it is 10.4%. So we need to increase this thing, bioenergy. Here we'll have installed power capacity as on 2024 data. So coal has much, which is 210.97 gigawatt, which is 48%. Then if we'll talk about the gas, so it is 24.82 gigawatt, which is 6%. If we'll talk about the wind, so it is 10%, 46.16 gigawatt. If we'll talk about the diesel, so it is 82.64 gigawatt, which is 19%. So we need to here work on which is the wind and bio and solar thing. Now we'll come to the another one, which is about the social sector. This is very much important, and so many of you miss this particular thing, that why social sector. But without social upliftment, without social development, there can't be economic development, and similarly without economic development, there can't be a social development. So these two things are interlinked, and it's very important to take these two things parallelly, because these two things are very much important for a human development, for a country development. So the survey highlights that there are certain programs which had been introduced by government of this country, which has aimed to empower the marginalized section of the society, has done better. And we had also suggested various programs and why it needs to focus on the marginalized section of the society. And they had also identified the persistent challenges which has ensured, what you can say, created a debacle in terms of inclusive growth. So there is areas, gray areas we need to work on. So if we here talk about the trends in social service expenditure by general government and both by central and states. So here we are talking about that what would be the total expenditure. So here this is in the crores. So earlier it was 3,000 crore, now it is 90,000 crore. And if we'll talk about the expenditure on social services, so it has increased from 21 to 23. And if we'll talk about especially in education, so it has slightly increased in education from 76 to 82. And if we'll talk about the education estimates, so there was no data available to this. If we'll talk about the education health sector, then this is also slightly increased, about 512 to 585 crore. And then if we'll talk about the others, so it has also slightly increased from 86 crores to 936 crore. So this is about that it has comparatively improved, but this slightly improvement needs to be worked on, and there must be more expenditure on social sector. If we'll talk about the as percentage of the GDP, that how much GDP contribution on, so expenditure on social services, so it has decreased, which is 7.8, earlier it was 8. Education, it has decreased. If we'll talk about the education, we do not have any data. Health, it has become stable, and others, it has also decreased. So we need to check into in terms of the GDP, because it is decreasing day by day, and it's very important to have what you can say focus on the social sector. Now we'll talk about the few initiatives and what's their achievement. So here we have some few initiatives like PM Jan Aushadhi Kendras and what its achievement. So 10,000 Jan Aushadhi Kendra was inaugurated in AIIMS Devghar. 965 medicines and 293 surgical equipments available. Amrit affordable medicines and reliable implants for treatment. More than 300 Amrit pharmacies operating in different states. Ayushman Bharat campaign. Then 16.69 lakh wellness yoga Ayushman Bhav campaign. So this is Bhav. So there is about 16.96 lakh wellness yoga meditation, 1.89 crore teleconsultation, free drugs available by 11.6 crore people, and checkup and immunization availed by 82.10 lakh mothers and 90.15 lakh children. So this is a quite achievement. Then we'll talk about Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. Then under this we have this 34.73 crore Ayushman Bharat cards generated, 7.37 crore hospital admissions have been covered, and 49% of beneficiaries are female as of 18 July. So this is data about the Ayushman Bharat. Then we'll talk about the rising prevalence of mental health issues. This is very much important because in pandemic we have seen that so many of us had suffered the mental illness, and so many of us had committed extreme step, and which is not acceptable, and which is very much sad state of a country, that we are not able to listen our own people because they were suffering from mental illness and we don't know that the person was suffering from the mental illness. So if you will talk this thing in an economic sense, it's very important. If you want to be economically productive for the country, economically productive for a household, you need to be mentally stable. So as per the WHO, which is World Health Organization, in 2019, 1 in every 8 people, or 970 million people globally, was living with mental disorders. So this is data by the WHO, and they are suffering from the most common disease, which is the depression. And if we'll talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, then this has become more serious in COVID-19 pandemic, and it has increased, and especially it has increased by 25.6% in what you can say cases of anxiety disorder. And so in pandemic it has increased a lot. If we'll talk about the Indian context, the National Mental Health Survey, which is NMHS, has showed that around 10.6% adults are suffering from the mental disorders, and there is a treatment gap in mental disorder which range between 70 to 92% for different disorders. So around 70 to 92% are unable to get treatment of the mental disorders. Then we'll come to the what other survey indicates. So the survey also indicates that there are prevalence of mental morbidity, and which is higher in urban metro region, which is 13.5% people, and as compared to rural area, which is low, quite low from the urban, which is around half, 6.9%, and urban non-metro area is 4.3%. So if we'll talk about the rural and urban areas, then urban non-metro areas are doing well. And according to Dhyani et al., individuals aged between 25 to 44 years are the most affected by the mental illness. So youths are getting most affected with this mental illness things. And if we'll talk about, if you'll see the mental illness with the lens of economics, as I have already told you that if you're not performing mentally well, you cannot be economically productive also. And in these circumstances, if you have issues like so many of us are suffering from the poverty, that affects the risk of mental health, because there's a constant threat of hunger, there's a constant threat of that how do we maintain our life, and rising urbanization, migrations, which has created a gap in social cohesion, anxiety, that had also developed and rose the cases of mental illness. So these are the possible reasons, and these are the issues if we'll see economically, that how mental health are impacting the economic development of a nation. Now we'll come to another one, which is about the status of school infrastructure. So these all things talks about the inclusive growth, and here I have taken few important points because this is very much important. If you write an essay, if you want to write anything on economic issues, social issues, you need to have these kind of the data. So here I am talking about the schools and how the infrastructural problems and gaps we have. So if we'll talk about the percentage wise, the basic facilities, so girls toilets, so it has decreased from 97.5 to it has decreased by 97%. Boys toilet, it has also decreased. And then hand wash facility, it has increased 94%. Library, reading room, reading corner, 88.3%. Electricity, 91.7%. Medical checkups in school, which is very less, which is 74.3%. Computer, 47%. Internet, 49%. So if we'll talk about the basic facilities, we do have basic, but if we'll talk about internet, computer, medical checkups, these are very lacking and concerning figures we are showing you here. So the government of India needs to work into these kind of areas where students needs overall development. Here we have data of enrollment in higher education from various categories, and here we have taken data especially for the females because it's very important to have, because despite having half of the population female, lacks education, they lacks empowerment. So that's why it's very important to have this data. So here we have 2 years, 2014 to 15 and 21 to 22. So here they have given the all numbers in lakhs. So earlier it was 342 lakhs and it has improved in 5 to 6 years, which has become 33 lakhs despite of pandemic in these years. If we'll talk about the SC categories, so SC overall 46 and it has increased the 66, which is quite good. Female 21 and if we'll talk about that, it has increased, so it has increased by 10% in these years. Then ST female is very much less, 7.5, and it has increased to 13.5, which is very less, and overall if you'll see, it is 16.4 and it has increased to 27%. Talk about the OBC overall 113 and OBC female, which is very less, 52.4, and now it is 163 and 78.2 for females. So overall if you'll see the data about the females, especially for the SC ST female, their number lacks, their number is very much problematic, very much concerning, and it is 13.5, 27.1. We need to work into these areas, especially for the SC ST female. Now we have practice question prelims. Before that, you have to also see this particular economic survey from economic perspective and also for the social perspective. We had talked about the employment, we had talked about the development of social sector, we had talked about that how category wise differences in educational system, we had talked about the availability of toilets and basic facilities just like computer, internet. We had also talked about the inflation, we had also talked about the growth rate and various other programs, world trade. So you need to have a particular and overall overview about that how India is performing to this sector. And we had definitely talked about the climate change and India's policies at world level are welcoming, and we're improving in terms of the solar energy, wind energy. But there are areas where we need to work a lot, especially in terms of the renewable energy. So here we have a question. How was the internet density in India as of March 2024? And here we have options 75.2%, 85.7%, 68.2%, 50%. So this is a easy question. You have to answer this in the comment section. I hope you like this session. If you have any queries related to this session, kindly ask in the comment section. And this was a very vast document. We had tried to decode this document in front of you. So I hope you like this session. Thank you and have a nice day.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.